So, my name's Gwynedd, and I just want to welcome you to this recording, to this video cast that I'm doing. This is the first of a series of conversations that I'm going to be having with Christians and with Christian leaders across Wales, in order to get a better picture of what God is doing and to be able to share that online, so that other Christians will be encouraged. And I'm pleased to say that it's Pastor Chris that I've got with me this morning. We're kicking things off with Pastor Chris. And I just want to welcome you, Chris, and just want to thank you for taking the time to join this morning and to share with people. And I suppose I need to tell people that you are my pastor. Myself and Jill, my wife, we attend your church in Beacon Church in Cowbridge. But so that people can just get a feel of who you are, do you mind just sort of sharing a little bit with regard to who you are, the journey that you've been on the last 2 or 3 years, and just share with people so they can get to know you?
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. As you said, my name's Chris Bullock, and I'm a pastor in Cowbridge. I'll share about that in a moment. But yeah, I've grown up in church. My dad was a pastor. My granddad was a pastor. My dad still is a pastor. So I'm kind of following in their footsteps, I guess. And yeah, my wife and I, Justine and I, we've been really journeying through this together over the last couple of years, as we've sought God for what we felt He was calling me into for a number of years, which was to be a pastor.
Right.
That I guess I avoided for a number of years when I was younger, maybe running away from that calling a little bit. But yeah, in terms of the more recent times, I went to study at the Bible College, the Elim Bible College, to do a degree. Then followed that up by doing a couple of years of training in the Cardiff Baptist College. And that's kind of led me up to this moment a couple of years ago where we felt called to start a new church. And that's where we are, really. So we've planted or started a church. We've not planted out of another church. So it's more of a startup, really. A church called Beacon Church in a little town called Cowbridge, which has 4,000 people in it. And there are a couple of churches in the town, but yeah, we felt the call to go there and to start something. And that's been the journey really over the last couple of years. We officially launched the church last July, on July the 9th. So we're coming up to, what are we, early June now. So we're coming up to the 1 year anniversary of the church officially starting. And yeah, no doubt I'll share a little bit more about the heart behind that. But that's a little brief introduction to where we are today.
Okay, brilliant. So tell us a little bit about Cowbridge. Why Cowbridge, and what the spiritual climate is like in Cowbridge, and why you felt called to Cowbridge. And then tell us also how the church is going, how you feel it's going 12 months down the line.
Yeah, so when we felt like it was time to really journey through praying into starting a church, I felt in my spirit, not through a loud booming voice or anything like that, but certainly felt like God was sharing three things with me in terms of the importance of where this church would be. Firstly, that it would be a place that people knew, so the name of a town that people know, and in South Wales and wider, Cowbridge is a known place.
Okay.
Secondly, that it would be close enough to where we live that we can have an impact on the community without needing to travel too far. And then thirdly, that it wouldn't be close to churches that either I've been working at or a part of in the past.
Okay.
And that's why Cowbridge was really the perfect place, I guess. So that's why Cowbridge. As I said, there's 4,000 people there. There's two other churches there at the moment, both with fairly small congregations. And we as we were really kind of seeking for where this place should be in terms of starting a new church, Cowbridge just was there right from the beginning, and it never moved away. So we decided for 6 months to journey through whether that was a reality or not. So we started to meet every other Saturday at one of the churches in Cowbridge. This was going back last January, so January 2022. For 6 months we did that. We started to gather a few people, including yourselves. And that's when we felt in July, this is something that is a goer. And we felt God say, again, through the prayer times we were having, that Cowbridge was where He wanted us to do this. The name Beacon came, and we wanted to be a beacon in the community and wider. Brilliant. And the spiritual climate, I guess, of Cowbridge, it's not very, very Christian. Less than 1% of the town would go to church.
Right.
So it's a very much not a Christian town, as many of our towns and villages aren't anymore in Wales.
Yeah.
There's the actual religion side of it. There's not really any other religion that's battling that. You've got a lot of agnostic people, maybe more so than atheists, which is why there's a great opportunity there, we believe, to go and share the love of God and the hope that we carry. And yeah, in terms of how I think it's going, 12 months in, it's amazing to think that that's happened. We really felt challenged around this time last year that as we began, the most important thing that the most important thing to do as a church was that we gathered to pray and to worship. And I know that sounds like the most simplified thing, but I really believe it's so important for us. And I think that there's a reset happening in the church in the West, and the church in South Wales, to bring it right back closer to home. I think God is calling us to just call upon Him, to call upon His name, and that's what we do. We keep it very simple. We meet on a Sunday at 4:00. The reason that is because it's not a challenge to any of the churches that meet in the town in the morning. So that's one of the reasons, as well as a couple of others. And then we pray together on a Tuesday night. We have a Bible study on a Wednesday, and then once a month we have a call upon the Lord worship and prayer night.
Great.
That's basically what we do. So it's
great. And as I say, Jill and I love being a part of it. Really, we've been made to feel welcome right from the very beginning, and we just feel part of what God is doing there. I'm just I'm encouraged by what you said about as you were seeking God about leading and where He was leading you, etc. And you said something that you didn't hear a booming voice. When as individuals, as Christians, when we're seeking God's voice, what we would hope for is that we either get a message, on paper from God, this is where I want you to go, or a booming voice. But that's not the way it works, is it? We have to listen to the heart. We have to allow God to speak to us through the Word. And the reason I picked that up, is just to encourage people who are watching and listening to this, that you may be seeking God on a direction, but just, listen to His voice. It's not going to be a booming voice. It may well be an audible voice. That's quite rare, but it does happen. But just listen to what God is saying in your heart. So it just struck me, Chris, about the journey that you've been on, and it wasn't this booming voice. So yeah, good. So 12 months down the road now, okay, how would you say things are going for you? Have they exceeded your hopes and expectations? Or I know you're a godly man and you want what God wants. Okay, that's clear from the times we've met and from what you say from the front. So I know you're seeking the will of God. But as far as where the church is now, are you sort of happy? Are you is it what you expected? Is it more than you expected? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been helpful because helpful to reflect upon that over the last few weeks, really, as we approach this 1 year, because it's good to not miss what God has already done. Sometimes we can be so focused forward that we forget what's happened over the last 12 months. And yeah, I really felt in my spirit as I was preparing to lead the services and the gathering times that we had, this idea of getting the room right, which I know, Gwyn, you've heard me say lots of times.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that isn't that we needed the perfect room in terms of what it looked like, but the people within the room, that we needed to really work on getting that right, so that as we grow through people who don't yet know Jesus, they're coming into a culture and an environment that models Christianity the way that Jesus expects it to be modeled.
Yeah.
And that's not because we had a bunch of terrible examples of Christians that were gathering, but just a reminder of all of us really, of why we do this and what we're called to do, getting the room right, and wanting to make sure that the things that maybe frustrate us at times about church, and the things that we've all experienced that maybe let the church down, to really try and protect against that. And there's strategies and planning and all of these kinds of things that people, say are important to do, and of course they are in many ways. But for me, the best way to try to guarantee unity is through praying together and through coming together around the Word and just keeping it really simple, really simple. And as we've done that, you'd be able to share more than I would, that as people have gathered, they've just loved what we're doing.
Yes.
And we joke that we haven't got anything spectacular to offer people. We meet in a room that is at the back of a pub currently, and it's not ours. We just hire it for a couple of hours a week. So, we meet in people's homes to pray. It's very basic what we do. But I think the heart of what's going on there, people are really engaging in, because whether we've been hurt or let down, or whether we felt frustrated with church in the past, there's still no doubt that the church of Jesus is the best thing on earth when it's done well, when it's modeled well. And we've all experienced it modeled well. We want to continue that. And as we seek God first and put him first and seek his kingdom with a united front to say, not my will, not what I want, not my agenda, but his,
Yes.
I really believe we can't fail. And
Yes.
I think it protects us then from any way in which disunity and disengagement or disinterest or things that happen naturally within churches at times, the more that we purposefully gather to pray and call upon his name, the less I believe that those things can happen. And I think from what I thought the church would be, maybe even 12 to 18 months ago, I probably had more of a westernized vision, and I can explain that a little bit more in a second if you need me to. Whereas as we've journeyed through and keeping it simple and going right back to the basics of the early Acts church, it's changed the way that we've modeled things, that I've led things from what I thought I was probably going to be doing over the last 12 months. So it's certainly different, but I'm very encouraged.
I think I will pick up on that, this sort of west-east thing that you've been talking about. But if I was to say, okay, what's the most impressive, possibly that's not the right word, but what struck me first and foremost is that you as a leader, and you've got the church sort of behind you in this. You've not modeled the church, but the church have got the message that you're saying as to, let's seek God first and foremost. Let's seek his will. Let's seek him and what he wants to do, rather than bring an agenda. Because as a pastor, you've got dreams, you've got desires, you've seen things happening, and you think that's a good model, but you've had to lay all that down in order to seek God and what he wants. And I suppose that's the most attractive part of the church. And I don't want to big you up or anything, Chris, but it does have an effect on people, and people who are themselves seeking the heart of God.
Yeah.
That message resonates, that first and foremost, we are here to seek the will of God and to demonstrate Jesus to other people. So, but just share a little bit more about, and I think it came out of your trip to Israel. Opportunity for you to talk about Israel again, Chris. So,
I won't miss that opportunity.
Chris loves talking about his trip to Israel. So, so here's an opportunity, which I didn't plan on giving you, but it's just obviously, it just happened, didn't it? Go on, share a little bit about this. Not your trip to Israel as such, but the after effects of this east-west thing. Yeah.
So again, it's not just from I was in Israel in April, so only 2 months ago. But in the lead up to that, as we were gathering to pray and continually kind of seeking God for his will for his church in Cowbridge, because ultimately we want it to work. We want to be there for a long time, and we want it to work. We want it to do the things that the church is called to do, to love people, to give mercy and grace and redemption and freedom and hope and all of these words that we read of in the Bible. So for me, as I've led that, I've been so adamant that we get it right, and willing to humble myself to move away from my own ideas, or my sometimes good ideas, I guess, and strategic planning and all that kind of stuff, to just, as I've said, bring it right back to say, God, what do you want to do? And interestingly, over the last few months, and really this year, I guess, from January onwards, as we've really been praying into that, I've found myself more and more, maybe frustrated is a strong word, but certainly not wholly content with what I see from the Western model of church. This idea of the big stages and the lights and the cameras and the smoke and all that kind of stuff. Now, that stuff in itself isn't a bad thing. I'm not against that. I'm not thinking that should never be in church. Like there's some fantastic churches that we know very well that would have that, and it's fine if it's modeled well. But I think what we've done, particularly in the UK, is we've looked west, we've looked towards America, seen these multi-million-dollar churches and what they produce, and I think we've tried to copy that, and we're either unable to because we don't have the finances and the ability and the buildings, But also, I think we've looked at what man is doing. We've looked at what people are doing, humans are doing, gifted people, godly people at times, and tried to copy. And I've, as I say, just found a change within me that just not felt wholly content with that. So I've been again praying and saying, like, what does it look like? How do we model this early church? How do we model what they did? You know, Acts chapter 2, where it talks about them having fellowship together with our very busy lifestyles. How do we do it? How do we get together? How do we eat together? How do we break bread together? How do we share community? So that was in my prayers, and then went to Israel, had an amazing week there. Not only looking and touring the places where Jesus and the disciples would have been, and Paul and all the other stories, David, you know, right in Jerusalem, but we met with lots of pastors and leaders of churches there today who are leading churches in Israel, and they were some of the most amazing people I've ever met. And yeah, to kind of jump to where we got to, as I was there, I really felt in my spirit that God was saying to me, stop looking at man-led church in the West, start to look at what I'm doing in the East and follow that model. And it was as clear as I can explain in my spirit. Again, it wasn't a voice. I didn't hear, you know, it didn't appear on a napkin in front of me or anything like that. It was just, as I was praying, I really sensed that and felt really at peace that it was the Lord speaking to me. Brilliant. And we met one pastor in particular. I'll just share this story. Yeah. And he'd planted a church in Turkey recently, just before the earthquake had happened earlier this year. And he was telling us encouraging stories of how he's going back there regularly, and they're meeting together, and God's on the move there, and all this kind of stuff. And he said, "Do you want to see a photo of the church?" And I said, "Yes, you know, please show us." And he showed me a simple photo on his phone of about 25 people gathered outside on a tiled floor outside somebody's home in the dark. And they had lots of food in the middle of this circle. And he said, "That's the church." And I just thought, wow, like that is far more, that looks far more what the church looked like that Jesus started than the one that we sometimes see. And that for me was like, that's what you need to get, that real togetherness. Not just, "Hi, how are you?" on a Sunday, and we respond, "Oh, busy, how are you?" "Yeah, busy," and then "See you next Sunday." That isn't the model of the church that Jesus started. So how we do that is the next thing. I shared it with the church when I came back the first Sunday, and it was the most unanimous agreement I've had in anything I've probably ever preached. So it's obvious that God is really stirring that up in us, I think, to, you know, just the celebrity culture and that kind of side of things in the West, and it doesn't sit well with me at all. And I just think God has to be the center. He is the reason, he is the purpose that we do this. And the more that we seek him, the more that we're going to see him move. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. And, you know your heart. And I know that in sharing that, when God was saying to you, don't look to the West, look to the East, there's no sort of criticism or there's no judgment on the churches in the West, because, you know, there are good churches there. We know good churches. We know good leaders, you know, in the West, in the US. So it's not a criticism of that in any way. It's just the word that came to you as the leader of Beacon Church for us in this moment. You know, good though that is in the West, that's not what I'm. That's not what I'm saying to you. I'm saying to you, you know, look to the East. So brilliant.
Yeah.
So just as we start sort of winding things down a little bit here, Chris, tell us a little bit about some of the encouraging things that have been happening in the church. Obviously, it's encouraging for you as a leader that you're hearing God clearly, you know, because you're hearing God, you're seeking God, you're hearing God, you're sharing with the church, and there's a resonance there. And I know from a personal experience, there's a resonance there, both myself and Jill, my wife. So obviously you're encouraged by that leading, by that guiding of the Holy Spirit. But as a practical thing, you know, practical level of how the church is sort of going week to week, what about sort of some of the things that you're encouraged by with seeing God at work? And can you think of anything, or things even to share in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when we go back a year ago, we probably knew we had 4 or 5 families that we knew were going to come along with us in this journey for the first 12 months, at least, from last July. Now we look at the church on the Sunday, and there's obviously quite a few more than that. And we've got lots of children, lots of families. We've had to employ a kids worker. So things like that are good, you know, but but that's not the reason that we're doing this. I never felt like I was called to just build a church with lots of Christians, because it's harder than just going to a church that already has lots of Christians. So that wasn't the calling. However, God has brought really great people to us who are, I remember sharing this with you probably around a year ago, about not just having like-minded people, but having like-hearted people who really have a heart after God and want to see him move.
That's key.
And as we've prayed for those people, God has brought them to our attention, or they've found out about Beacon and they've just come and they've just turned up. And some of these people that literally wandered through the door at 4 o'clock on a Sunday, having heard a whisper about us, have now become key parts of our prayer church meetings and all that kind of stuff. And that's really the most encouraging thing to me. It's who has been gathered, because we've been inwardly focused, which is interesting, because everything about my build up to this was the frustration with churches being too inwardly focused. And it feels like God has said, well, hold on that one for a sec, get the room right first, be inward focused so that you're ready to be outward focused. And as we gather, as we did last night, I know you couldn't make it last night, but again, a great time just praying with each other, and there's such a sense of unity in that time together, as there then is on a Sunday. There's just a real sense of togetherness, of people just saying, yes, Lord, we want you. We don't want self. We don't want people to lead this church. We want you to lead it with us, through us, and whatever you want to do. And I think that's the biggest encouragement to me. I know it's not the most practical thing, but it is a sense of that togetherness that God has brought. And as we've kept things simple, we don't have meetings after meetings after meetings. We haven't got heads of all of these different ministries and this yet. As we grow, that will naturally happen. But there's been a real sense of just taking it slow, not rushing, not running before we can walk, and getting the core right. The barometer of the church being that gathered time of prayer and worship. That's what's important, not 500 people sitting on a seat. That may come. I don't know in the future. I don't know if we'll ever go to that size, because I think my idea would be, which we haven't got time for, that it would be lots of smaller churches rather than one big kind of regular gathering, I guess.
That'd be an interesting one to pick up in another interview, maybe. It would, and I can really touch on it quickly, because as people are gathering to Beacon in Cowbridge, and some are traveling as far as 40 minutes away, which again, obviously we love having them with us, but the calling of the church wasn't to start a church to gather lots of Christians to travel in from. If that was the mandate, we'd already have succeeded. But God has brought these people absolutely to us. But for me, as I've been praying into that, and as people come from different communities, I don't sense that these people are going to come and stay at Cowbridge forever. They might be here for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I really sense that what God is doing amongst us, the culture that we're building and creating, led by him, will lead to these people either going back to where they came from, or on to somewhere else, to either start a new Beacon, or to go back to a church they were previously part of, it, to carry the heart, to carry that passion for his name. So that's where I feel like we're heading in terms of that. But as we approach this first year and we're looking at a building option and things like that, we're really excited now that the next stage, as we've got the room right, as we continue to get the room right, we start to see people from Cowbridge and the surrounding areas that don't know Jesus yet come and ask, what is it that you carry? What is this hope you've got? We want it. We want what you've got. And I believe that will happen. So, so we're excited. Brilliant. So one last thing, Chris, and I do need to say, Chris, that, I honor you as a leader, because, you've got a real passion and a heart for God, and, you want his will, and I honor that in you, and it's great to have a leader like that. Okay, so I want that to be on record, really, for the world to know. But just one final thing: if people sort of are touched by this, if God speaks to them through this interview, how can people pray for Beacon Church, or for you and Justine? And I'm not going to include the dogs in that, okay? But how can people pray for you and Justine in the church? So, any way that they can go on?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's the most valued thing I think we could ask for from anybody. It would be to pray for God's will. It seems like the cliched thing to say, but sometimes not all church leaders might have that viewpoint, and they might say it but not necessarily feel it. But we want to make sure that that's protected, that we continue down that path. of seeking him and his kingdom and his righteousness and all that kind of stuff. So really praying that that's protected in the church, not just in Justine and I, but in the church, that the core is that we seek his will. And as we do that, we know that there'll be a blessing over the church, not for our own gain, but for his. Brilliant. And that again, that it's not cliched to say it, but that the right doors would be open and the wrong ones closed in terms of literal buildings that we would love to have access to, but also to people, to key people in the town that we'd have good, solid relationships, trustworthy, built upon a good foundation with people who don't yet know him. And then lastly, that people would obviously come to know Jesus, but in particular, there's some very key people who I won't name, but there's some very key people in Cowbridge who, if they became Christians, would be massive moments for the town that could lead to a really great sense of his spirit moving. So just be praying for that. God knows who the people are. Just be praying that key people in the town, people who have authority, people who have keys to the doors, people who have keys to the shops, the buildings,
people with influence,
influence, that they would not through Beacon necessarily, but they'd meet the Lord. And as we pray over the town, as we battle for that town, that the Lord would appear to people in dreams and the ways that he's doing things in the East. As we look at what's going on in the East, you see these Muslim background believers whose stories are incredible, where Jesus appeared to them in a dream. That can happen for us as well. And that would be it, I guess, the culture to remain, for buildings and for the doors to be open for us, and for key people to turn their lives over to Jesus.
Brilliant. So, Chris, thank you very much. I'd love to be able to just carry on talking to you. Okay, I would, because I love to hear your heart, and and I'm sure other people who are watching this and listening to this, will be touched in some way. If they're seeking God, they will be touched by your heart and your passion in some way. So, listen, I'm going to let you go. I want to thank you, and we'll sign out, but thank you very much indeed. Okay, Chris?
Thanks,
we'll
you.
Speak soon. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
God bless.
Bye.
Bye.